Nicola Holland, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, nice to meet you virtually.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. You are Mark Holland's wife, and Mark was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he had an accident last year in Morzine, where I live, and he had a spinal cord injury. And you're here to tell your side of the story, the side of the story that doesn't often get told.
Yeah, definitely. When I was listening to it, there was a lot that resonated in the sense of, I know you sort of spoke about the carer's perspective or like the girlfriend or the wife's perspective, and hearing some of the things that Mark was saying, some of them was new to me. And I thought, oh, wow, actually, I didn't know that he thought that or he felt that way. So I thought, okay, this could be a good platform in which to share the other side of it, not just from the person who's injured, but also from the people around him, and how that's sort of hurt and developed them and made them grow and things. So yeah, lots of thoughts really regarding it.
Absolutely. When you suggested coming on, I thought about my own accident and what happened with my girlfriend at the time, Lou, and the ripple effect that happened. And I mentioned it in the podcast with Mark. Like when you have the accident, you sort of go under anaesthetic. You have an operation. You have a lot of memory loss, and you wake up, and there's been a huge ripple throughout your community, and you were unaware of it. And there's, I can only imagine getting that phone call, hearing the news, wondering, shit, is he going to be alive? All of those things. And so, yes, I mean, in your own words, wherever you want to start, please let me know.
Yeah. No, again, definitely that ripple effect. And I think for Mark, in a way, I'm jealous that he had that in the sense of not knowing what was happening and not knowing what had happened in those sort of 24, 48, 72 hours afterwards. So I got a text message. It was on a Friday night, and I can literally live it minute by minute. That night was one of the longest nights of my life. I had a text message and a Facebook message from one of his friends who he was in Morzine with. And it said, I don't really want to have to do this or send this message, but Mark's had an accident. Can you call me? So I thought, okay. So I rang him, and he was like, it's not good. He's been airlifted to the hospital. I don't know what's happened, but he said he's hurt his back and that he couldn't really feel his legs, and I think he's got a collarbone injury because I could see the break, sort of thing. So I was like, okay, so where's he gone? And they said that they were taking him to the Geneva hospital. So then it was obviously straight away, heart palpitations, everything's going sort of thing. So I rang my sister and said, Mark's had an accident, and then had a full-blown panic attack. I was on the phone to her, and the next thing, she's trying to coach me. She's on the phone to my mum at the same time. They're trying to coach me to make sure that I'm breathing and everything. I was in the garden, the kids were in the house. Because obviously I was Mark had gone away on the Sunday. So this was the Friday. So in essence, we were thinking he was coming home that Sunday. So I was still on my own with the kids. I'd got in from work. I'd just picked them up from sort of childminders or every place that they were. Got into the garden, and I was sort of trying to breathe, basically. I was laying down, my hands went tingly, my face was going all funny and numb and everything, to the point where my mum and my sister then finally arrived basically at the same time. And they were just sort of trying to coach me. All the while, my kids are quite oblivious to this, which is perfect, because obviously I wouldn't want them to have seen me in that state. They're trying to, so they get there. My daughter comes out and obviously notices that I'm upset. And so it was a case of, well, Mummy's just not feeling very well. I'm okay, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes you just, when you feel a bit sick, you just get a bit upset. So we were just trying to sort of, because we didn't know what we were facing at this moment in time. And so managed to sort of get myself together, and then proceeded to make a few phone calls. So I phoned his brother, and he was just about to go for a running race. And I sort of said, look, I think it's quite bad. And he was like, I'm sure I'll be fine. And I was like, yeah. I think so too. But I'm just letting you know, because at the moment I don't, and I didn't want to let his mum know, because I was like, I don't know what we're dealing with. And I don't, as a mum myself, I was like, I didn't want to cause additional worry when we didn't know what we were facing. So I rang my sister-in-law, and so I was talking it through with her. And then by this point as well, we were sort of starting to think, we really, I really need to, obviously I've got to let her know, actually, I really need to let her know. But I knew I couldn't have that conversation. So luckily my sister-in-law, I say to her afterwards, I said she took one for the team, because she made that phone call and let her know. Then got phone calls backwards and forwards with his brother, with his mum. I was speaking back, and all the while trying to get information from Geneva as well. So I'm trying to find the Swiss, Geneva hospital. And every time I'd phone them, it would be a case of, he's still in surgery. He's still in surgery. I was like, but can you give me any information? Do you know what has happened? Like, what injury we're facing? And it was like, no, like, he's just in surgery. Like, he came in, he's had an accident. They're working on him. And that proceeded to be the rest of the night. My sister stayed with me for a bit, but then she obviously had to go home and sort her own family out. I then proceeded to just sort of I was just there. Everything was going around. You hit in survival mode. I needed to put the kids to bed. I needed to sort everything, in that respect. Backwards and forwards with text messages, phone calls and things. Letting friends know, that I think that he'd had an accident and I'm not sure what was happening. And then I started watching Walking Dead because, what else do you do when you need to take your mind off something? So that night I was awake all night and I just watched The Walking Dead. And then proceeded to watch that ever since, continue. This was the second time around of watching it, but watched that all the way through because it was the only thing that was just something that I didn't need to, there was no emotion involved, all of that sort of stuff, but it just meant that I could just be not where I needed my head to go. And I finally got through to the hospital at about 4:30, 5 o'clock the Saturday morning. At which point they let me talk to Mark. And I was just like, oh my God, because I didn't know if he was coming out of surgery. I didn't know what we were facing, and all the thoughts happen, all of them go through your mind. And like I say, I wasn't sure what we were facing. And he was like, you're right. I was like, yeah, are you? You okay? What's happened? What have you done, you sausage, sort of thing? And he was like, yeah, I had a bit of an accident. I was like, a bit of an accident, babe? Like, come on now. I was like, this is, what's going on? And then he was obviously quite drugged up and such. So then the events continued to unfold over the next sort of day, let's say. So his brother managed to get a flight out on the Saturday, and then I sorted to get a flight out for the Sunday morning. Needed to sort out, obviously we've got 3 kids together, so sorted out the childcare and whatnot for them, but in the meantime trying to just see, okay, well, what else do we need to sort and what injury are we facing? His brother, when he got there, he sent a picture which was like, oh, yeah, he looks like Mark. But, he was swollen. Like, he sort of, you could tell he was on the drugs and could tell he was smiling. And that, for me, was like, this is, okay, we're all right. He's compos mentis. At least he's still got his brain. I don't know what else we're focusing on, but, And then it was starting to come out that he was paralysed. So it was like, right, what the, like, the whole world literally, like, in that period from the Friday night to me getting there on the Sunday, the time, so much happened. And like I said, with Mark, obviously he wasn't aware of everything that was happening and that ripple effect. But we were, there was phone calls, there was, okay, right, if it is paralysis, obviously my way of dealing with it is to try and think, right, what can I control? I couldn't control a lot of the stuff that was happening in that instance. I couldn't control what was happening to Mark, but I could control, how do I sort out the house potentially? How do I get him home? How do I, approach life now, sort of thing? How do we approach life? So there was a lot of, and even at this point, I still hadn't seen him, but my head had gone straight to that point of going, right, what do we need? What do we need? Let's think about this. So managed to get on the flight on the Sunday, and then seeing him, and then the doctors came in and spoke to us and sort of said, yeah, paralysis, he's got a complete spinal injury. And they sort of spoke us through. And again, as soon as that was happening, straight into, I said to his brother, he was sitting down at the time, I said, you need to move. I said, because I'm going to go again. Like, I'm going to pass out or something. And he was like, what about me? I said, I don't mind what you do. I said, but I'm going to, I said, I need to sit down. Because again, going through that second panic attack, because it's the reality, it hits you again. And I was faced with my husband laying in front of me. He was obviously in intensive care. He's got multiple things he can't do. He can't feel his legs. He couldn't, he was in a lot of pain. And he just was, he was still him, but it was a broken version of him. And then the couple of days that preceded that, again, very much a blur. I remember his brother was amazing whilst we were out in Geneva. For me in particular, I needed him to be there because there were so many times where I just needed to be held because I was obviously, in tears and breaking and such. But he was also really good because I really couldn't eat either because I was so, the emotions had got the better of me. So he kept trying to just encourage me to, here, have this, like, just take a bite of it, please, just take something, or let's get you a drink. Or if he knew I couldn't make a decision, he was like, I'm not going to ask you, let's just walk, or I'll make that decision for you. Because I was like, I just couldn't, like, it was like being in a different zone completely. I was such a bizarre thing, but at the same time we were in this fantastically beautiful country and it was like beautiful weather, and I was just like, what the hell, like, you're looking around and you're just thinking, this isn't happening, how is this, like, I don't like, what? And honestly, I still to this day I look and I think someone's going to wake us up at some point and be like, it was just a dream, it didn't happen. So that was like, like you say, the first couple of days. But we were, alongside that, I was also then trying to make conversations with his insurance companies to work out what was happening and what insurance we could do and how do we get him home and things. And that was not a pleasant experience.
You said that you said you might get emotional. I was fighting back tears then because it struck me as like so familiar, and like the things that my girlfriend at the time went through, and it kind of like almost makes me feel a bit guilty because I was drugged up, I was like anesthetized, I was happy, I was I was in an opiate haze, and all this trauma was going on around me, and I don't mean to make it about me, but it was so relatable that that's why I was so emotional when you were telling me the story. I was like, oh God, don't cry. But you could see me in my face. I was like, it really made me emotional because, and I think that's probably when I spoke to Mark on the podcast, he felt the same. Like, there's this guilt associated, even though like we didn't do it on purpose. We didn't break our backs on purpose, but there was this ripple of trauma that we caused, and it does make you feel like bad. You're like, I don't want the people that I love to feel that way. And that's, it's beautiful, but it's also difficult to hear, knowing that you had a very similar experience to, So that was, I wasn't expecting that at all. I was like, you can tell your side of the story. And you said, I might get emotional, but I wasn't expecting.
I had to keep not looking at you because I could catch that you were sat into, and I was thinking, no, hold it together for a minute, because as soon as I see you, if you were starting to cry, I'd leave blood-brewing mess, and then we wouldn't have much of a podcast.
No, it's good. So what happened after that? You were saying about the insurance.
Yeah. So, again, really vivid memories of walking up and down the roads in Switzerland on the phone to insurance companies to sort of say, look, we've got this insurance policy, this is what's happened, like, can you talk us through the proceedings and what happens? And initially, so helpful, so helpful. And then the reality starts to hit, in the sense that his travel insurance just wasn't going to cover it. He'd got full travel insurance for extreme sports, but the mountain biking, it turned out, had to be on tarmac.
What?
Which, yeah, when you are facing mountain biking, the whole clue is that it's in the mountains, hence the mountain
Yeah.
biking, and not road biking. So it was mountain biking on tarmac that was covered. And actually, when it turned out, I think when he looked at him and his mates after sort of some while, when they all looked at their insurance policies, only one out of the four of them would have actually been covered for that injury. So then
Insurance
we were
companies,
faced.
eh?
Oh, yeah. So obviously I was exploring everything. We were doing the travel insurance, we were doing the health, the medical insurance. Then it was a case of, oh my God, what about the fact that now we're in a foreign country? How do we even pay for the bills? Because obviously they're not NHS and everything. So then had to make those phone calls, and I was thinking, oh my God, like we're going to be faced with like this massive bill at the end of it, because it's Geneva. Obviously that's like one of the top hospitals, like actually, of all the places that you could have got injured, I was glad that it happened there, because they had their hospitals are beautiful and the staff are so helpful, and you can understand, why it is a private sort of system over there. And the surgeons were so good, but the costs, you then think, oh my God, like only on top of this, I've got my husband who's paralysed, we've got 3 young children, I can't now know how to get him home, I don't know how I'm going to pay for the bills, I know we have to do all of this because I need my husband, like it's not a case of not paying for it, we would pay for it, but I don't know how much this is going to cost. And so then I got home on the Tuesday. I left on the Tuesday, and obviously that was really hard to have to come home, but I needed to come back and sort my kids and such. Obviously my sister she's got twins herself and my nephew, so that she's got 3 kids, and then I've got 3 kids. So for my family to have to then sort out the 6 of them, let's say, whilst we were dealing with this, and also for them as well, there's a lot of trauma, not just for Mark's family but for my family. We're very close in that respect. So they're also going through their own level of emotions. My sister's being there on the end of a phone all the time, whilst I'm in Geneva, and then giving updates and whatnot. And so I got back on the Tuesday, and again, the whole process of trying to sort the phone calls, trying to sort the insurance, trying to sort everything. And in the end, it was, we might have to ask for money from people to actually get him home. And that was really hard, actually, because we're not necessarily people that ask for help in that respect. And so to have to then go through the process of saying, look, my husband went on holiday, he's had an accident, we can't get him home, I don't know how much it's going to cost to get him home. I will literally take out all the loans in the world to get him home, but at the same time, that's then going to have an impact on us long term. So we said, right, let's just see if people, and oh my goodness, the people came. We set up a Just Giving page. Well, my sister set it up, and then we started launching it sort of on our social medias and such. And my sister launched my husband's social media whilst he was out there as well. So we got the word out, and my friends, family, everybody, the people were just coming through with these donations, and we managed to get over £10,000. The first night hit our target of £5,000, and me and Mark were both in tears, obviously seeing that coming through, and all the support and people reaching out and asking and saying what can they do, and it knocked us, because it was a case of, oh my goodness, like people are just being so kind and so loving. So we got some money, and still at this point, I didn't know how much I needed, to sort getting him home. And we were working with companies, and I was getting, okay, so how much for an aeroplane, transfer? And that was coming through at like 25k. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, like, okay, right. Okay, we're still going to need some money then. I'm still going to need to put a loan in. And then I thought, right, I don't even know if a plane's going to be the best route, because obviously in terms of turbulence, like what is they going to be able to get him down, and are we okay in that? Then he was like, look, just put me on a normal plane. I was like, how am I going to put you on a normal plane, babe? Like, honestly, like, you've just had major spinal surgery. And this is where I was like, you're still in cuckoo land because you're obviously
Yeah.
still high on morphine. He was like, yeah, and I said, yeah, but I don't even know if they'd let you on, Mark, because if you've got like a surgery and you've got a spinal injury, they might not let you on because of their insurance stuff. So I was like, look, I'm not going to even entertain that thought. But this is where my husband, he goes into that land and you go, okay, dear. So we ended up exploring the ambulance routes. And the ambulance routes, again, had their own challenges because not only was it the cost, it was also the time.
Yeah.
So we were looking at least a day's worth of travel.
Yeah, it's a pretty unpleasant journey in a comfy car, to be fair.
Yeah. So, but we found this company and they were amazing. And the gentleman, Matt, that we were speaking with, you know, when you just click with somebody and you think, actually, I need to go with you because you understand it. And then they sent through lots of correspondence and they told us about our crew and they knew, you know, we knew a little bit about each of them. And then they picked us. So I flew back out again. This was after about 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks as well, our twin boys had turned 3. So I'd had to go through their birthday without their dad being there on the party.
And at what point did you tell the kids?
We told the kids on when I was going out on that Sunday. I said, look, Mummy's got to go out and see Daddy. Daddy's had a bit of an accident. So Mummy's just got to go out and check to see if he's okay. And then I'll be back. And it was a case of, okay, you know, and like I say, the boys hadn't at this point turned 3. They were a week off turning 3. My daughter was 6. So their naivety, their young brains, that was good because it meant that they could just be, okay, Mummy's just going to go off. And, you know, at this point, I think we were telling them that maybe he'd hurt his leg. Because, again, the reality of it, we still don't understand. And, like, to be fair, I still don't understand it. But I can't comprehend what the future looks like. So we told them. And then, obviously, even when it came to the boy's birthday, they didn't, you know, they knew Mark was still in hospital. He was still on holiday, like away in the hospital, and he's just got a bad leg or that he'd hurt his leg and hurt his shoulder. They'd spoken to him, like obviously on sort of FaceTime and such, so that was useful. But when it came to the boy's birthday, I know Mark tapped out of life that weekend, and the morphine was being, you know, he was needing that because it was so hard for him to be away from his kids. And then it was, on the flip side, it was obviously really hard for me to have to celebrate and put on that face for my boys to make sure that they had that lovely day. All whilst knowing my husband's in hospital in another country and I still don't know how I'm getting him home. And I don't know, you know, what life can look like, you know, so
that must have been incredibly difficult.
Yeah. Not an experience that I necessarily want to go through, but I also know it really hit Mark. You know, he and as a parent, you can't imagine not being there, like on your kid's birthday, and because of the circumstances, it was just.
And what did you do on the birthday? Was there some sort of celebration? Were you with family?
Yeah, we had a party. So we'd got the boys. They love climbing and running and jumping and everything, so we actually hired out this gym tots hall and they had all the beams and the equipment out and everything, so we had a gathering with some of our close friends and some of their friends from nursery, and we had a party and they each had a cake each. But even that, like the photos of us, like with the cakes and with the boys, like it's just me and the boys, and obviously Mark's not in those photos from their 3rd birthday, so it's you know, and in time they'll look at them and they'll know why, but it's luckily, like I say, they're only 3, so they don't really process it at that point.
Yeah, that must have been so difficult, especially when you look at the photo and he's noticeably absent, and you're like, oh goodness me. And it must be also come with like a flip side of like, well, at least he's not gone, you know, like he'll be back, you know, it's like, you know, it could be worse. But it must have been difficult, especially with family members and friends all knowing and all keeping this secret, you know, like, you know, we can't tell the kids it's their birthday, you know, they'll know in time. But that must have been such a difficult day.
Yeah, it was. And it was also difficult because obviously it was one of the first time that family or friends had seen us since this had happened. It was only literally a week after the accident. So a lot of the friends, you know, they live around the country, or the family members. So Mark's family live sort of Peterborough way, which is about 45 minutes from us. So on that day, it was one of the first days that I was seeing my really close friends, you know. And so then for them to give you a hold and a hug, you know, it's more than just the hi, like it's a party, yay. It's a more of a, I'm just going to hold you for a minute because I can see that you're about to fall apart. But at the same time, knowing I can't fall apart right now because it's my boy's birthday party and we're all about the celebration at this moment in time. So yes, very difficult. And I mean, it's one of those things where I think that's when you find your inner strength. Because you managed to, you know, I don't know how I got through it, and I don't know how I got through that day, but I did. And so then I'm like, okay, right. And then when I think back over the times that we've managed to get through, not only with Mark, but, you know, just as a family, or the times and the days that we've managed to get through, like I am sort of in a way astounded at the strength that I had, because I was sort of even dreading, you know, dread's probably a big word, but when you've got 3 kids and you've got the summer holidays, let's say, coming up, and your husband's working sort of most of the week, you think, oh gosh, that's just me on my own with the kids. I did it for 9 months, like, you know, and we sorted out the logistics of life. And like, obviously I had the family support and Mark's family support, and they were tapping in and such. But at the same time, like I say, me and Mark, we don't like to always ask for help. We had to ask for help in that instance, but we don't like to, because we know that they're our children. You know, we took that choice. We made that choice to have the family, so we shouldn't. We don't expect other people to look after our children as much as they love it. You know, and everybody gets a lot from it. It's always something that we don't want to put that on other people. So the fact that I managed to, you know, like I say, find the strength to sometimes get through all those periods of time, over those sort of 9 months whilst he was backwards and forwards, and all the different issues that we faced whilst he was in different hospitals. Yeah.
It's interesting how sometimes we find it so hard to ask for help when if you had the shoe on the other foot, you'd say, of course, you know, like, oh my God, if it was a neighbor or your sister, you'd be like, of course I'll look after your kids. It's no burden for me.
Yeah.
I know exactly I don't know what you're going through, but I can imagine what you're going through. God, let me help. Yeah. And you're like, no, you know, I'm going to bravely power on through.
Yeah.
It's all good. So yeah, that's hard. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and it is, and like you say, it's. You think, oh yeah, I'm like, no, I'm going to power through. I'm going to do this, and actually, it's what, like, what's the benefit of doing that? Actually, because you know, and I still am. There's moments where I'm definitely and completely burnt out because of the responsibilities or the pressures of life, and having the young family, and having, you know, a disabled husband, and having just the life that sometimes comes with that. But at the same time, there's so much joy and happiness and love and, you know, connection that comes through that. So I have got, I think, and Mark and as well, we have got better at asking for help. You know, and I suppose that's one good thing that's sort of come from it. But
so Mark mentioned that you guys have become a lot closer since the accident. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I mean, we reflect on this a lot, actually, over random conversations that we have, and we always say, if we had the chance to go back to Mark before the accident, or us before the accident, and have his legs back, would we do it? And we wouldn't, actually, because if we could go back to him having the legs, but us knowing now what we know about each other, then obviously. But if it was a choice of going back to who we were before the accident or him having his legs, we both say actually we would prefer to be who we are now. Because the level of connection, I mean, Mark's level of emotion in the 10, 11 years that we've been together, the emotions that I've seen from him since this accident, I've not seen ever from him, apart from like when our kids were born. But he's opened up an awful lot. His vulnerable side has come out, and I still can't imagine half of the ways in which he has been vulnerable in the hospital with regards to, you know, some of the care and help that he's had to need. He's a very proud man, and to see him at times so broken and so much in pain and so debilitated by what had happened, but at the same time, his energy and his positivity and the way in which he wants to help others learn from this and grow is brilliant, because he does inspire. And like I know he said he doesn't want to be called an inspiration, because it's like, well, what have I inspired you to do? Well, he's inspired me to be like a better version of me, because he's made me want to be, you know, more aware of myself. He's made me want to be a bit more present. He's made me want to reflect on what we have as a family more. And before the accident, Mark was very much, I think he thought that the only way he could be defined as successful was through work, and that became his identity. And, you know, it's always been a part of my identity as well. My work side, I'm very, we've both got high work ethics, and we want to work hard and we want to do the best for our children and provide for our family. But I think for Mark, when he got his sort of his job role and being able to see and feel the benefits of being successful at work, he sort of strove for more of that, because he liked the fact that he could provide for us as a family. He liked the fact that he could, it was nice. You know, he could see the feedback, let's say, from working. But the downside of that is that sometimes he was quite absent, I guess.
Okay, apologies, dear listeners. There was a technical issue and we're not sure when we stopped. However, I do remember you saying about the vulnerability with Mark, and Mark showing some vulnerability. And I think a lot of the mistakes that people make, maybe men especially, is we think that our partners want to see strength and sort of like this stoic person, that could, and that in many cases is true. But like in my experience, when I was injured, there was a certain amount of vulnerability that I showed to my partner at the time, which definitely brought us a lot closer together. And I think that, you know, when you're at the lowest point, you know, it's certainly, again, vulnerability. I'm trying to look for a different word, but it really is vulnerability. And it can really foster a deeper connection. For example, before my accident, I think that's a difficult word to use, but I think I was kind of like one of the cool kids. Like I worked at one of the cool bars in town, and I was a good snowboarder, decent mountain biker. And I think that my girlfriend, that was probably one of the things that she didn't like about me that much, actually. And when that was taken away from me, it was just me, you know, it wasn't like the people I hung out with, the abilities that I could do. It was just me laid bare. And I had a very low image of myself because I had my identity ripped away from me during the accident. and she still loved me when I didn't see myself worthy of love. And that, for me, that really brought us so much closer together. Even though we aren't together now, like, our paths eventually, our paths no longer aligned, but like for a long time, we were so close. And again, just seeing someone at their lowest, I don't know, can you relate to that at all?
Yeah, completely. I think, like you say, I think the times when I've felt so much closer to Mark are those times when I've seen him probably at his most vulnerable, in the sense of, and when I've been able to try, I suppose, in a way, like fight his corner for him as well. So like there was a couple of times where, I'm obviously having to be his advocate, because either he wasn't able to, maybe, or actually he didn't necessarily always want to rock the boat sometimes, especially with the hospitals. But I'm not about just settling and letting things happen, for example, in some of the hospitals and the lack of basic care. I wasn't okay with standing by for that, because this is my husband. He is my world, and if you are not going to treat him like that, then that is not okay. So there was a couple of times where I think, because seeing him in a way where I could see part of that light had gone out in him, because he felt exposed, he felt vulnerable, he felt, and like I say, I can never imagine how hard it must be for him as a grown adult, and I suppose in some ways, because being a grown man, the level of intimate care that has to be provided, especially in those initial stages, and that it's not just about paralysis. And I think that's the bit that everyone forgets, and probably, and rightly so, or doesn't necessarily understand, because you've not been in that situation. People say, oh, he's paralysed, and think that just means he's not got his leg function. Like, that's the easiest part in a way, because
that's the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?
Yeah, but actually that's the bit that I think mentally you can accept or approach with. And I know that's the bit that I've found easier to accept. And it's the bit where, within regards to the connection level between me and Mark, it's that bit that you go, okay, right, your legs don't work, you can't walk, or you can't weight bear on them. Fine. Okay, obviously that's awful. But it's the other sides of it that are the bits where you think, he's in so much pain. The neuropathic pain at times, is crippling. The issues with the bladder, the incontinence, the transferring and the leaking, the toileting, and actually at the beginning having to see him as a grown man, obviously being changed and not knowing that he'd done something, and all that sort of side of it. Like, obviously he didn't want me to be present for that, and I didn't want to be present for that in some respects, because I'm his wife, and that does take it to the next level and makes me more carer than wife. But if it means that he's okay, I will be doing that. I'm not going to allow him to be in pain, to be, laying in something or whatever. Like, I would sort that, and I think, but seeing him so vulnerable, so broken at times, it was a side of Mark that I'd not seen before, and he was so much. He was very, like I say, he was very exposed. He became, he needed me as well as I needed him. And he would be there, and he was still my protector, and he still is my protector. And I think that's been a massive thing that he's found difficult, because he thinks that he can't protect us and the kids now because of his disability. But he only has to hold me, and that stops the world. So, but he doesn't necessarily see it that way. He won't realise that that's all that sometimes you need is just, a warm embrace or something. So we used to do date nights when he was in the hospital at the beginning. So at Kettering and then at Corby, we would do date nights. So once a week I'd go over and we would just have me and him time, opportunity to just connect, just to watch a film, have a cuddle, because they were the little things that meant so much at that moment in time. And actually that's what the accident has allowed us to do, is to strip back everything and say what is important about this. And what's important is, and there are some of the biggest things that I find difficult is that I can't hold his hand when I'm out walking because he needs his hands for his wheels. So being able to talk that through and saying to people, you have that opportunity whenever you want. And it's really stupid because we wouldn't have necessarily done a lot of that at the beginning, when we first went out or before the accident. But I miss it so much, being able to just walk alongside and hold his hand and have that security of somebody holding my hand, or a stand-up hug. My God, I'm still yet to have one without a table in between us. Because when we managed to get it done in Stoke, where he was on his knees and I was holding him, and we were holding each other, and obviously that sent the whole of Stoke gym, nurses, physios, everybody into tears, because obviously we were in tears and they were in tears. So that was fun. But then a standing one, he's obviously got his standing frame. So he's got the table in front of him sort of thing, or it's a side on one. So the day when he is able to stand up, and he's a 6'3", so it's a good embrace. He's a whole head height above me, to be up there, for him to be standing and to have nothing between us and to hold each other. That will be my creme de la creme moment, because that's what I need, and I need him to feel that as well, because I think that will help him to feel as though he is that protector of us still, because he's got that, presence and that hold and that way around us. So in terms of the level of connection and the seeing him as vulnerable, that has been part of the bit that has definitely brought us closer, because he's been stripped back and I've been stripped back, and we've had to be able to just think what is important, and what's important is just me and him and the kids. Everything else is, and he always used to say this, everything else is just noise. It's just stuff, things that go around. And yes, a lot of that stuff we need, work you need so that you can have that life and we can have the home and all that sort of stuff. So there is stuff in that. But when you get to the bottom of it, the fact that one of the best things about him being able to come home meant that I had somebody to lay next to put my head on at night, to we're not cuddlers. It's very much a cuddle and a roll thing. If you know friends, it'd be a case of, hey, and off we go. Because we're not that sort of, we can't fall asleep in touch. But just being able to watch the telly and be there with him, and even just knowing that he's there and he can lock up the house, and that's not on me. That's his way of being able to protect us as a family. And so, there's definitely been, and there still are, now that he's home, it's hard to sometimes not get into old habits in terms of the relationship and different things. But throughout it all, we are constantly reminded.
Sorry, excuse me. What do you mean by old habits? I suppose the roles in which you play in the house, so I've lived in survival mode for so long, obviously, whilst this accident was happening, and I had to do, and I call them blue jobs, pink jobs, that sort of thing. So putting out the bins, doing the washing, certain things like that. So I've had to survive, and I've had to put in logistical sort of strategies throughout all the day to allow the world and our life to function. Now that Mark's home,
some of that is I have to give that up, like elements of the jobs, elements of the roles. And I'm not, I am a very busy person. So I constantly am on the go. I'm constantly doing things. And so for Mark, it's a case of he wants to feel involved and part and purposeful and having that responsibility in the home. But there's elements that I've then had to say, okay, yeah, I need to get that out of my habit, my psyche over the last sort of 9-10 months of doing it. I can hand that over to you. So, but that takes conscious effort and conscious thought to do, but also to then go, well, can you do that? Or what can you do? Or what can't you do? And I've worked for the last sort of 15 years. I work with children with special educational needs. So I'm not one that will, I'm very much an empower people with disabilities. I don't see a disability. Yeah. So if there's a way of doing it, I will try and make it happen. But I would find myself with Mark not doing that. Like, he would be going around and I'd notice things on the floor in front of him and I'd be thinking, oh God, I need to move that out of the way. Or I'd be putting things so that they were really easy to get hold of. And I was thinking, what am I doing? Like, this goes against everything. And I'd end up resenting myself for behaving that way. But then at the same time, I'd say to Mark, because he'd make a comment, like, oh, can't get in the door because the kids' shoes are there. And I'd say, well, you can move them, or you need to just talk to the kids and get them to move stuff. So I
think that's a really healthy way of dealing with situations like that, because otherwise you can fall into a role of like being a sort of a carer, or not necessarily a carer, but like a sort of mother. And it's nice to, allow him to do things, and it's going to feel good for him as well to do things for himself. And also to, if the kids leave their shoes around, they need to know that, daddy's wheelchair can't go over shoes. And, that's something that needs to be sort of taught, sooner rather than later,
Yeah. And that's it. But it's finding those, it's having those conversations but also having those conversations at a time when you're not, the rest of life isn't weighing down on us as well. So like sometimes it's a case of I've got in from work, I've had a busy day, the kids are jabbering on sort of thing. And then Mark, there's something on the floor, for example. Now for Mark, that's just a case of there's something on the floor. Oh, these kids need to move it. But for me, it's a case of, oh, he's expecting me to move that. Whereas if I was in my logical mind, and all of those other things hadn't have happened, I could have just said, okay, right, so how are you going to help yourself? What can you do? What do you need to do about this situation, rather than me taking it on as that I'm expected to make his life easier. So that's like a me issue, but I think that's important. And this is one of the things that I wanted to make sure that tried to get that flip of it, because although he doesn't want me to be his carer, there are certain elements of life that I am now responsible for. Like, I got in the car the other day, sat in the car, and he was in the car seat, and he was like, what are you doing? I was like, gosh, I haven't put your wheelchair in, have I? So, like, I just got in, and I hadn't put his blooming wheelchair in the boot. Like, that's his legs. But that's my responsibility. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's where... you become a carer. I mean, obviously, he can yes, and for now, until he's got his own car and then he can sort it out, that's fine. But when you think there's so many like little blurred lines behind your wife or your carer type role, and obviously he is at the moment very much at in terms of needing to get around, because he hasn't got the car. I do have to do all the transportation. I have to attend or, take him to the medical appointments and things like that. But it's hard to say, okay, so when are you carer and when are you wife? And sometimes those lines, especially at the beginning, can become a little blurred.
Well, you've also got to give yourself a break. Mark's been injured less than a year. He doesn't have his car and his hand controls yet, and there's a lot more independence down the line for sure. I heard this great thing on a podcast recently. It was just emphasizing how communication is key. It said unspoken expectations are future resentments. So that's quite powerful. So if you think he has these unspoken, or maybe both of you have these unspoken expectations, like maybe you think he expects me to take things off the floor, or maybe you expect me to do stuff without communicating that is a future resentment. So if I would be so bold to offer you some advice, I would be have an honest conversation, take some time and say, like, listen, what roles should we have a little brainstorm about what roles should we do, and that will evolve over time as well. Like I say, Mark, he's still in his first year. He's doing so great, and he's got so much more independence coming down the line, especially once he gets his hand controls in his car. He will be away, and then he'll be able to take the rubbish out. He'll be able to do all sorts of stuff like that. For example, I can put the rubbish in the back of my car, because it's different in France, so I have to take it to like the poubelles, like the big bins. So we don't just like put the wheelie bins out. But there's so much more independence that I've got since the car, and that's all coming for Mark. You know what I mean? So give yourself a break. It's not meant to be easy. It doesn't come with an instruction book. You know what I mean? So especially with kids.
No, and I think sometimes it's harder in the sense of now that we've come back home. He's come back home. Obviously, the kids are around. Life is it's getting back to reality, let's say. We're not living so much in that bubble land. Whereas when he was at hospital, it was very much, you can compartmentalize. You could say, right, it's that lovely moment because daddy's coming home, or we're going to go and visit him, and all those lovely times. But with that, you could then have those really intense conversations, because me and Mark would have maybe an hour and a half conversation on the way backwards or forwards between the hospitals, especially when he was at Stoke, or I'd go down and be part of that conversation with the doctors or something, or I was on Teams call. So it allowed those conversations to happen because we were sort of forced into it. Whereas now being at home, you have to create those moments. You have to create those times in which to have that conversation, because you can't just sort of openly have that hour conversation whilst the kids are around, because your attention's diverted so many different ways. By the end of the day, sometimes you might be a bit too tired, or he might be in pain, or he's on his standing frame. I'm tired from being at work. So I think you have to actively work on that level of communication to make sure that you still are making sure you haven't got those, those hidden expectations of each other, or those things that become the resentful comments. You don't want that to then happen. So I think we're definitely finding our feet with how that looks and what that process is, sort of now that he's at home. One thing that has definitely helped me is the support of the backup mentors. So this is so we have the backup charity, and they have a family mentor scheme, which I was able to be referred into. And so now I connect to a lady, Lynn, and at the beginning I was connecting with her every week, but then we're now doing sort of fortnightly and such. But she is I think their family are about 12, 13 years down the line. So her husband, similar injury to me, they had young children, similar injury to me, similar injury to Mark. But the same scenario of life. So being able to talk to her and seek advice, seek answers, has been so helpful. To just have somebody on the end of the phone to know that what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling is completely normal and completely natural from a wife, girlfriend, carer, partner, family member's point of view. And just being able to, again, get first-hand advice and information. I was talking about holidays, for example, because, again, you think, okay, so what does that look like? How do we go on holiday, like, as a family? Sort of thinking, okay, we weren't going to do it in the next couple of years anyway, because all the children are quite young, but we want to go abroad and we want to go on a plane and we'd like to go like a lovely beach holiday. What does that look like? So being able to ask Lynn and talk to her about opportunities that she's been away, you know, the fact that they've done like skiing holidays or that they've done beach holidays and that this is a really good place to go and these have got accessible beaches. Just having that first-hand information and that first-hand advice has been really helpful. But it's also allowed me to then, again, create that situation where I can share things with Mark, because he will ask me after my call, oh, how did that go? Like, what did you talk about? And I'm like, okay, so we spoke about blah, 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 blah. And then it opens up that conversation. So it's a way of just planting those seeds to then think, okay, I do need to actually talk about this because it's come up in this conversation. I think that means that it's burning on my mind. I need to have a chat with you about it too. So yeah, but like you say, we're not even a year down the line yet. You know, year anniversary will come up in July, but for where we're at, I think we're doing pretty well.
And I know that you guys are only in the first year, but if you could offer any advice for someone in a similar situation that maybe found this podcast and their partner has been injured in a similar situation, I know it's a difficult question to answer, but you know, if you could offer any advice, what would it be?
I think it would be to feel all the feels. Like sometimes you have to lean into those emotions, like from all parties, like allow yourself to go through the cycles. I think there's still a lot of, it feels like a loaded word, but grief connected to it. I know nobody in this instance, like obviously Mark is still with us, but there is a grief of a life that we potentially expected ahead of us. But with that, there's also an excitement and a joy. You know, some of the experiences that Mark's been able to have since this accident, you know, being able to do the skiing, the wheelchair rugby, the connections with the spinal cord injury, the links with amazing people across the world, like being able to talk to yourself, you know, all those things, that's as a result of this injury. And so we have to feel the joy as well as the sadness. But know that whatever you are feeling in that instance, it is okay. And it's, you know, you don't need to, we don't need to pacify our emotions for the people around us. You don't need to hold it in. You don't need to, and especially like, so from Mark as well, I don't want him to hold them in. I want him to be able to feel all the feels as well and know that that's okay. So I think for the injured party, the people around you, they want to see you feeling those feels as well, because it shows strength in doing that.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important things that you've mentioned is that if you could go back and have the accident not happen, you wouldn't. And I think that's really important. That's certainly something that I have expressed in many times before. And I think I want to go back to that actually, because I wanted to remember when I said that I was like, well, I guess one of the cool kids. I think I built my identity up on this sort of like false ground. I was like, you know, on my abilities, you know, and I think many people do, you know, like I'm a mountain biker, I'm a snowboarder, I'm a chef in a busy kitchen in one of the cool bars in town, you know, that's me. And then when you strip yourself bare of all of those abilities, you are, and I think you used a word earlier that I loved, and it was exposed. I'm exposed, you know, who are you without your snowboard skills and your cool clothes? You're there, you're naked, you're exposed, you're vulnerable. And that's when you realize who you are. And then you build yourself back up from rock bottom, and you realize, oh my God, like actually the person I was before, it was someone who I can't return to. I can no longer return to that person. And, you know, yes, there's grieving involved. Yeah, there's grieving, but there's also a bright future. And there's a lot of personal growth, which you can't, you know, you wouldn't want to give up your personal growth for the ability to move your legs again. And I think not everyone feels that way. It's very common, but there are some, you know, I'll be honest with you, some people find paralysis a lot harder than others, and some people suffer with the secondary complications a lot harder. But for me, it's been a journey that I've been very fortunate to have, I guess, seen the silver lining on. And Yeah.
No, I mean, I agree. I think the paralysis, the secondary side of things, everything, it's a lot to deal with. And like you said, not everybody, you can't, however you deal with it, like whether you go insular, extrovert, however, Mark has definitely gone into the positives of it, and actually is seeking that, which is really, it does help me and it helps his family around him. But I just, I suppose from my perspective, I want to make sure that he knows that, and that other people know that, that's not always what we expect from him. Just because he's positively minded, it's okay for him to have those down moments as well, because actually it's like what you say, from those moments of vulnerability and exposure and being stripped back, that you actually see the true core of someone. And I think he's been able to really show that. So yeah, there's a lot, but it's good, and we're looking forwards and not backwards now.
Yeah, I think that's important, and I think you should let him know that, and I'm sure he will when he listens to this podcast. Nicola, thanks so much for taking your time today. I apologise for the technical issues that we were having during today's conversation, but it's been a great chatting to you. It's been great getting to know you, and I think this conversation is a worthy one to share. So thanks so much for your time.
No, thank you for your patience with the technology as well.